Your future depends entirely on the health and homeostasis of your brain. Keeping it functional and balanced should be your singular focus. From political polarization to professional wrestling, from workplace conflicts to family dynamics, brain health isn't just the subplot, it is the central storyline. Every headline, every relationship crisis, every societal tension can be traced back to collective and individual limbic system function. Because a healthy brain is a healthy mind. And a healthy mind makes healthy decisions that shape not just individual lives, but our collective future. So, from a psychological perspective, a developing brain needs safety above all. When a child has safety, both emotional and physical, they're allowed to explore both novelty and familiarity within the context set by their caregivers. And so, this combination, novelty and familiarity, that is what forms the foundation of a well regulated nervous system. Because in order to have a well regulated nervous system, you have to have a flexible nervous system. So being able to oscillate from novelty, from new experiences, the potentiality of danger into familiarity, where genuine safety, connection, and presence is, that builds the foundation of your nervous system. The anti fragile nature of your nervous system actually requires stress in novelty, in uncertainty, in exploration in order to continue to expand your zone of comfort and familiarity. This is what forms the foundation for confidence, clear decision making, and emotional regulation. So, what happens when safety is not present? And now I want to be clear here that when I speak on safety, I'm actually speaking on both physical and emotional safety. When either of those are lacking, what happens is that chronic stress takes over. This is going to disrupt brain function. It makes impulsivity, anxiety, self sabotage, poor decision making the norm rather than the exception. And this disruption, it goes way beyond just emotion and behavior. It actually alters the very structure of the brain itself. If you're like me, you might be surprised to hear that chronic stress and trauma, it actually alters the brain in ways that are similar to patients struggling with traumatic brain injuries. So, veterans or those in intensive care units, their neuroimaging actually reveals very similar disruptions in emotional regulation and in autonomic fear responses as those with long term emotional trauma. So, when a child does not have this safety, their first solution is hyper-attunement. And so, this hyper-attunement, it is a learned behavior. And so, growing up in an unstable, unpredictable, or emotionally volatile environment, a child learns to put excessive focus on those around them in order to maintain secure attachment. They may read tone or shifts in body language or micro expressions as potential threats to the safety and familiarity that they've been able to establish for themselves. And so over time, this hyper attunement, it becomes way more than just a habit. It actually becomes a way of life. And what kicks in is vigilance and eventually hypervigilance. And when you're in that state, boy, your amygdala, your brain's built-in alarm system is on high alert. And so a simple conversation, it can feel like you're walking on a tightrope. A subtle shift in somebody's tone, their facial expression, or their body language, it can send you into fight or flight before you even knew what happened. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the energy shift? Maybe you recognize a little shift in somebody's body posture, the way that they're breathing, a little glance in your direction, and you feel it. You feel it in your body. Your body registers a sense of unease in that environment. So, this right here, this is an example of hyper attunement in action. It is a deeply, deeply ingrained survival mechanism. As a kid, if you develop this hyper attunement, what very often happens is that in adulthood, you'll get labeled as an empath. Maybe you call yourself an empath. Maybe you consider yourself as an empath. But I want to offer a subtle reframe here because this is very often a misconception. So there's a real difference between hyperattunement and true empathy. So in order to have true empathy, differentiation must take place. And so now differentiation is the ability to have a clear and distinct sense of self while also being present and attuned to somebody else's emotions. But with lack of differentiation, it's very often felt in our relationships because we become so absorbed in other people's states, fears, lives, dreams, desires, worries, insecurities that we lose sight of our own. And so, Dr. Daniel Siegel, one of my favorite practitioners, he explains if you are excessively focused on others' emotions, you may lose touch with your own internal world, leading to anxiety, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. So the cost of hyperattunement without this grounding power of differentiation, it is a feeling of being disconnected from your true and authentic self. And what it does is that it manifests in these really harmful relationship patterns. You may find yourself people pleasing, anticipating other people's needs or desires, often sacrificing your own needs and desires for the sake of theirs. And now you'll do this to avoid conflict or gain approval. And you may also struggle with codependency, right? Your sense of worth becomes attached and enmeshed with caring for others. You like to feel like a caretaker. You feel the value and the approval of being needed. You'll most likely struggle with boundary issues. You struggle to distinguish where your emotional landscape ends and where somebody else's begins. This results in blurred lines that create confusion. Emotional burnout. You carry the weight of others' emotional states, feeling as if their emotional life was your own. This often creates, exhaustion and frustration. You feel as if their mood, their pain, their happiness is your own. An analysis paralysis. You overthink choices based on how others might respond to you. The deep fear of rejection or disapproval leads into you constantly overthinking even small decisions like a haircut. And so these relational patterns, they actually end up reinforcing the original wound. They perpetuate cycles that are difficult to break without self awareness and a real, earnest desire to change. So, for example, you might feel validated when others are pleased with your efforts, but it only deepens the disappointment when that approval fades. And the emotional exhaustion from constantly, attending to others, it leads to a burnout. It makes you, you end up feeling incapable of tending to your own needs. And so the tricky thing is that these behaviors, they often run on autopilot. You may not even realize that you're stuck in these behaviors until you experience the consequences of them. And you can recognize the real toll in which they've taken on your life and your relationships. And now this hyperattunement and hypervigilance is not just going to show up in your emotional life and your relational life. It's also going to show up in your body. Because when the sympathetic nervous system being designed for just short bursts of activation like running for danger is constantly on overdrive, you end up developing what science calls sympathetic overload. This is when your body is constantly flooded with stress and cortisol that it has an inability to find deep rest and relaxation. So the body becomes trapped in this constant cycle of stress and tension. And when this happens, it actually reveals a way deeper connection between the mind and body. So the fears and the emotions that your brain can't quite process, it ends up manifesting in your body as a way to cope with the emotional stress. Sometimes the emotional pain and the emotional stress is so great that our mind body system would actually rather experience physical challenges than really face, integrate, and process our emotional wounds. So, in mental health spaces, it is very common for clients and for patients to somaticize their challenges. Now, somaticization simply means feeling mental distress as physiological symptoms. It's when the mind has an inability to process these emotions and they need a way to express themselves. So on the low end of the spectrum, an anxious person, might feel anxiety in their hand. They may notice that their hand is shaking or tense or tight. And on the high end, somebody who maybe has a deep subconscious fear of death, they may constantly feel like they're diseased or unwell. Feel like they may not even have a physical illness, but they're constantly checking themselves for new diagnoses, new illnesses, new diseases as a way to sort of process and relate to the emotional stress that they're experiencing. So, on a way deeper level, the body may be free of disease, but due to this constant stress and the need for somaticization, they end up developing various physical challenges like exhaustion, sleep problems, chronic stress, compromised immune function, digestive issues. But it's important to recognize that somaticization is not inherently negative. In fact, it serves a wonderful purpose. What it does is it helps us bypass primitive mental defenses that prevent us from deeply experiencing and feeling our life experiences. And so it's closely associated to disassociation. Disassociation and somaticization are two ends of the same spectrum. So, disassociation is when the mind has a tendency to pull out of the body, disconnecting itself from the body's experiences. Somaticization is the opposite end of that spectrum. You may end up feeling your physical or bodily sensations or physical challenges to a greater degree as a way to bypass the mental emotional pain. And so the path to healing, it really starts with awareness. The first step is just simply understanding that hyperattunement and hypervigilance, they are not personality traits. In fact, they are learned adaptations that can be changed consciously and directly. Because these patterns were once necessary for survival, but now they are not as necessary, and you can establish new ways of responding. So, there are some practical steps to reclaim this safety. One of my favorites is to create safety anchors in your environment and in your routine. Maybe it's a place you go to, a yoga class where you know everyone there, you feel safe, you feel comfortable. It's a weekly check in. Maybe there's a space in your house and you're an environment where you sit down to do your inner work. You have a meditation pillow, you light some candles, maybe get some nice photographs of people that you love and that you miss, in a place where you can really feel safe and contained in this ritual of self care and understand that this is an opportunity to go a little bit deeper. I would also highly suggest you work with a trauma informed therapist, one who can really walk you through the process of learning how to regulate and train your nervous system for flexibility and for safety. If you're interested in learning more how to do that, I've actually created a 5-day free email course for you. It's 5 days to becoming a regulated human. I'm going to walk you through some tips and tricks, but most importantly, I'm going to share with you the common pitfalls and traps that most people struggle with when they're beginning their process of nervous system retraining. Ultimately, you just need to remember that healing is not linear. Some days are going to feel like progress, some days are going to feel like a regression. This is normal, it's part of the process. So, to create lasting change, what you have to do is you have to create a balance between your sensing and your structure. And so, what I mean that by that is that we need to balance the formless, right? Our feelings, our sensations, our experiences with form, which is ritual and structure and containment. And now this balance is what creates the necessary boundaries for neurological rewiring. So the best ways to do this, there are two different approaches. You can have top-down approaches or bottom-up approaches. And so top-down approaches, we're going to work from the mind down into the body. This includes, applied behavioral psychology, really understanding and identifying the thought patterns that are associated with some behaviors. You can use cognitive restructuring to create more balance and more proportionate responses to those said behaviors. I would suggest mindfulness meditation as a top down approach. This is going to create space for you to build greater awareness around your thought life. There are also bottom up approaches, which means we're starting working with the body, deeper subconscious mind, up into our more conscious prefrontal cortex centered self. So, my absolute favorite modality in all of mental health is somatic psychology. This is how you can directly release stress, trauma, and energy from your nervous system, from the deeper part of your brain, freeing up greater vitality, greater energy, and greater resource that will help you in using and applying some of these top down approaches. You can also use breath work to directly calm the sympathetic nervous system and to activate our parasympathetic response. There are also many movement therapies that are wonderful for processing emotion and memory that may be stuck in our muscle memory and in our movement patterns. So true healing, it involves recalibrating the nervous system to recognize genuine safety. You have to allow hypervigilance to soften into a subtle, appropriate awareness. The goal is not to lose empathy, it's actually to develop it authentically from a place of choice rather than a place of survival. And so, with persistent effort and support, the body can remember what it's like to feel truly safe. I guarantee it. I've done it myself. I've worked with hundreds of clients over the last 7 years. I've seen it happen time and time again. There is a proven formula for change. So, we live in a relational world where reciprocity is a rule in nature. And in order to step into our true human state, one in which we're constantly, growing, evolving, connecting, we have to be able to attune to another person. But we want to be able to do this from a place of differentiation, right? Where we can hold our own distinct sense of self and differentiate from other people's states, experiences, emotions, etc. And so, in order to do this, in order to truly differentiate, first we have to be able to attune to ourselves. And from here, we can engage with others not from a place of vigilance or hyper attunement, but from a place of genuine presence. This inner attunement, it also creates a deeper avenue for healing because the most profound healing happens when you develop a new relationship with your bodies. Because by returning to the body, the very place where the original wound existed, we can create a new template for connection. The body knows what it feels like to be safe, even if the mind's forgotten. So, by listening to our bodies with compassion rather than hypervigilance, we begin to heal the very pathways that were once overloaded with stress and fear. In a world racing towards technological advancements and artificial intelligence, the most important evolution remains the one within, from a place of survival to conscious choice, from hyper attunement to true empathy and connection. Hey, folks, my name is Brian Meyerhofer. I am an associate marriage family therapist and men's coach. I really appreciate you taking the time and checking out my YouTube video. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit that like button, and also send this video to somebody who you think might need it. Maybe it's your girlfriend. You're working on better boundaries, better forms of communication. Maybe it's a father, maybe it's your dad, maybe it's your mom. We live in this relational world. Relational skills are the most important on the planet. It's good for family, good for business, good for life, good for communities. Learning how to genuinely relate, connect to another person is abundantly important. And it starts with beginning to distinguish empathy and hyper attunement, hypervigilance, and genuine safety in the body. Again, I appreciate it so much. If you want, I've got some links down below. We've got some resources there for some more somatic psychology. Check out my new email course, 5 Days to a Regulated Human. I'm going to walk you through how to avoid the pitfalls that most people make when they are beginning this process of nervous system regulation. All right. Appreciate you all. Professional human out. Appreciate it.